Gather round and welcome back to the Week 9 edition of 5 Thoughts on This Week in College Football, folks. And just when you thought it couldn't get any crazier, it gets crazier by the minute, and we are about to head into November. Yes, next Saturday is November 1st, and it is where it really is going to I don't even know if it could get crazier than it's been in September and October, but I got a feeling it's about to get even more bonkers as we get into this season. So let's break down the Week 9 5 thoughts on this week in college football. Thought 1 on Week 9 in college football. Let's start in the Big 12, and let me tell you something. We thought this was going to be a crazy season in the Big 12, and it just gets crazier and crazier by the minute, and we saw Arizona State lose yesterday to Houston. Houston was a team that I thought could maybe get 4 or 5 wins this season. And let me tell you something. This team could literally win the Big 12. If a few things play out just perfectly for them, this team could be the Big 12 championship, and it's not that far-fetched. But we had Texas Tech just blow out a very bad Oklahoma State team yesterday. We had BYU going to Iowa State and win by 14 points against a team that I've been telling you has been overrated all year, and that's Iowa State. I don't know why everybody was in love with them. Cincinnati is just absolutely on a roll. They blast Baylor yesterday. So my top 2 teams coming out of the Big 12 at the beginning of the season were Baylor and Arizona State, and both of these teams are gone. They're not going to make a championship run. They can't at this point now. So we got BYU, who's still basically in control of their own destiny. BYU still has Cincinnati and Texas Tech on their schedule to play. So it's really going to shake out here to see who can get in there. Cincinnati is just, they're just rolling along after that loss to start the season against Nebraska. I almost feel like they could probably blast Nebraska now. And then, we still have Houston and, who else do we have in that conference? But the bottom line here is this thing is going to shake out. And at the end of the day, there is a very, very reasonable position to take here that the Big 12 could get 2 teams in the college football playoff. Yes, I said it. I don't believe it, but I said it because if we have BYU, let's say BYU, let's say they beat Cincinnati but lose to Texas Tech, that would put Texas Tech and BYU in the Big 12 championship game. And, as we looked at it last year, do you really get hurt if you're in the in your championship game and you lose, but you're still a quality football team? And we would have a 10-2 Texas Tech team and a potentially a 12-0 BYU team if Texas Tech beat BYU in that championship game. Could we see 2 teams from the Big 12 get in? I'm not saying it's going to happen, but this is a real dang possibility here with these teams that are left remaining in the conference. So I just can't believe that here we are, going into November, and we still have an unbelievably tight race in the Big 12, which, we thought was going to happen, but we surely didn't think it was going to be between Cincinnati, BYU, and yes, a lot of people had Texas Tech coming into the season just because of the money they spent, but there's a real possibility that Texas Tech might not even get into the championship game of the Big 12 and be left out of the playoffs completely, depending on what happens here between these football games with, going into the month of November. So, just to say this one more time, there's a real possibility 2 Big 12 teams could get into the playoffs. And I'm not exaggerating here. It is literally a possibility depending on how these games play out. And it's going to be just absolutely bonkers if there's even a chance that this could happen. So we're going to find out, wait and see. But I really, really like to watch the Big 12 and their brand of football. Yeah, maybe it's not the Big Ten or the SEC or even up to the caliber of some of the teams in the ACC, although this year I don't know who those caliber teams are other than Georgia Tech. But the bottom line here is that the Big 12 is just fighting. It's like a Royal Rumble over there. That's right, to use a wrestling term here. This is the Royal Rumble, and one of these teams is going to come out standing. And the question is will it be a team like Texas Tech, and could BYU still sneak into the playoffs? Could Cincinnati still get into the playoffs? It is absolutely crazy, and here we are in a crazy football season, and it would just be absolutely nuts if two Big 12 teams made it to the college football playoff, because no one predicted that going into the college football season. So congratulations, Big 12. You're sure making it real interesting for the committee to have to figure out what they're going to do here at the end of the season. We'll see what happens as these games are played, but right now, it is just absolutely crazy how this is going to end up. And I really do feel like you could have two teams in the college football playoff. And that, my friends, is just bonkers enough. Thought 2 on week 9 in college football. All right, let's get a look into this Missouri at Vanderbilt game yesterday. Yes, that's right. College game day was there. I don't really know why, but they were there making a big stink about it. But the bottom line here is what I saw. I saw two pretty average football teams playing each other yesterday. And yes, people are going to tell you that Vanderbilt is this great college football team and they're probably going to be playoff bound. And there's a very good possibility. I don't think they're going to be, but there's a very good possibility that they can get into the college football playoff. But I just don't think, with what we saw yesterday out of these two football teams, that either one of these teams could make a run anywhere near, being competitive against a quality team in the college football playoff. The question is, who is a quality football team that they're going to have to play in that first round? And it's real shocking right now that I don't know that there is 12 teams that can make a run in the college football playoff. So what the heck? Maybe Vanderbilt can, maybe they can't. But let me tell you something. They're going to have to play a whole hell of a lot better than they played yesterday. This was a lackluster performance by Vanderbilt. And if you think anything other than that, you just didn't see the game. I mean, Vanderbilt's possessions they had 4 drives in the first half that netted under 100 yards. They got 3 points out of one of those drives, but they had a drive, 3 plays 0 yards, 3 plays 18 yards, 4 plays 19 yards, and they ended up having a decent drive before the half. I think it was, 8 plays, 44 yards or something like that netted a field goal. They go into the second half, they turn the ball over, they have a one play possession, 80 yards, which gets them on the board with 10 points. In Missouri, they lose Bo in the third quarter, and, he got, a third-string quarterback, second-string quarterback, a kid that was nowhere near, the ability to play, and still almost got this thing into overtime on the last dang play of the game with that long throw down the field, which dang near could have scored. It was unbelievable. But the bottom line here is, I don't care what you guys think about Diego. Yes, he's an exciting story, but he is not some kind of phenom quarterback. And I've heard people put him in the Heisman race. These numbers just aren't Heisman type of numbers. I mean, they had, 265 yards total offense. Yes, and Missouri's defense, if you look statistically, they're ranked in the top 10 in many categories, but they just haven't played anybody. When they played Alabama, they really couldn't stop Alabama's offense in that football game. They played them tight, but it wasn't really great. And what we saw out of Alabama yesterday isn't very, that's not an explosive offense to say coming out of Alabama. So I'm just still. Although Vanderbilt won the game, and I'm going to have to move them up in my poll probably, get them up further up in the top 10. But the bottom line here is this team, honestly, it's just average. And as we continue to watch the SEC unfold, there's just not a lot of good football teams, dominant football teams. We thought Alabama was last week, but then we watched them play South Carolina yesterday. Just absolutely, honestly, a pathetic performance by Alabama's offense. Yes, they ended up coming back and winning the game, and you could say that South Carolina gave them the game there at the end, letting them score. I'm not really sure what all that was about. I know they wanted to get the ball back, but they had no timeouts and 37 seconds left in the game. That's not a very good chance to come back and score. Yeah, maybe in the NFL, but not in college football. You don't see teams drive the length of the field in 35 seconds with no timeouts to win the football game. But the bottom line here is that these, in my opinion, were two they're good football teams. Don't get me wrong, but they're not great football teams in Missouri or Vanderbilt. And yes, ESPN's going to hype it up. But look, Washington and Illinois were better football teams yesterday than Vanderbilt and Missouri. I would put both of those teams on the field with these two teams right now, and I guarantee you that Washington, if Vanderbilt traveled to Washington, there would be no contest in this football game. And if Missouri went to Illinois or Illinois went to Missouri, it would be an extremely close football game. It could be a flip, toss the coin to see who won that game. But I am just not sold that either one of these teams is a college football contender to make any type of run in the college football playoff. And that's my stance on it. You may not like it. Leave a note in the comments and tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me where I'm an idiot. Say I'm a moron. Whatever you want. But the bottom line here, 265 yards at home against basically in the second half against a backup quarterback, a third-string quarterback, whatever he was. You just have no if this was on the road, I could give him a little bit more of a break here. But this was at home. Vanderbilt, this thing was hyped up. This crowd was crazy. And, this was a 10-10 football game for most of the second half. Really, really not a great game to watch. And honestly, I had to keep looking at other games because it was just honestly not that great. So I'm going to give this game a C- in the games in the terms of a quality game, and I just don't think either one of these football teams are really as good as the national media is giving them. Yeah, sure, Vanderbilt's got one loss, but I just don't see them being able to beat Tennessee. And yes, maybe they can go on the road. We'll see what happens with Arch Manning with the concussion protocol for next week. If he does have a concussion, that's the news I heard about it. But I just don't think that Vanderbilt's a very good football team. Sorry if you don't like it, but that's the truth of the matter here. Thought 3 on Week 9 in college football. Folks, the most interesting conference race as we break down and get into November, it's got to be the American Conference. That's right. We saw Memphis come back and beat USF yesterday. We still got an undefeated Navy team. We still got a Tulane team that's, one loss is to what looks to be a pretty good Ole Miss team. We still got North Texas, who, is still getting things done, not being talked about a lot. And honestly, Temple could still be in this race, and they could beat some teams here. I think they play North Texas and Tulane still on their schedule. So this American Conference is going to be quite the interesting conference as we get into November. Obviously, Navy's got the toughest schedule. They got to play North Texas. They got to play Notre Dame, which is not a conference game, which won't affect this. They still got to play Memphis, and they still got to play USF. And they luckily don't have to play Tulane, or that just would be the brutalest of all brutal to play all four of those teams at the end. But the bottom line here is that can Navy actually make a run? They have not been playing by far their best football, so maybe they've been saving it for November. But this American Conference is absolutely going to be a barn burner here as we get down into the month of November and see who can win these football games. So I'm really excited about it. I can't wait to see what happens. I think it all starts next week when Navy and North Texas go at it, and we'll see if Navy can get that win. But this conference is it's going to be a tricky team, whoever comes out of this conference, for that number 5 seed to play. Yes, because more than likely, the little sixth winner is coming out of the American Conference, and the fact that Boise State did not look super great the other day against Nevada. Yeah, I watched that game. I think that was, a Friday night game. They did not look great at all against a pretty average, if below average, Nevada team. But the bottom line here is this American Conference champion, if they get the 12 or the 11 seed, they're going to be a really, really challenging team for whoever's in that 5 or 6 spot here in the college football playoff, and not a team that I necessarily would want to start with just because they're pesky, man. All these teams are pesky and they can beat you. We already had Memphis beat a vaunted SEC team. Now, if they would, if somebody in the SEC beats Arkansas like Texas A&M a couple weeks ago by 3 points, you got to hear, well, this is how it is in the SEC. Well, Memphis just beat Arkansas, so here you go. So bottom line here is that I think the American Conference is going to be one of the most fun conferences to watch as we finish off this season, the 2025 absolute chaos season that we're in. And we're going to see if it can keep going here in the American Conference. And I'm super excited about seeing how this thing's going to end up. But at the end of the day, Memphis comes back. What were they down? 16 or 17 points in the third quarter and come back to win this football game. Just an explosive output there in the fourth quarter. And it's just going to be exciting. So if you're not watching the American Conference, you probably should, because this thing is really going to boil down to some fun football in November. And I'm again rooting for the Navy midshipmen, but man, they're going to have to play a lot better than they played to go through this gauntlet of North Texas, Memphis, and USF. And that's going to decide the winner, or at least the two teams that are going to play in the playoff, in the American Conference Championship game. Because remember, Navy doesn't play Army till after that game. So there's a very good chance, if Navy can win 2 of these football games, they're going to be in that championship game, and it could be real interesting to see if they could get the bid to the college football playoff, which, if you remember, I predicted that from the beginning of the season. I thought the Navy midshipmen would be the 12th team in the college football playoff, and we'll see if it can still happen. But it's an exciting brand of football, and if you're not watching it, you're definitely missing out. Thought 4 on week 9 in college football. All right, people, this is something that I never thought I could say. I never thought it would come out of my mouth, and here it is. The Iowa Hawkeyes could make a run to the college football playoff. Yes, you heard it right. The team that lost to Iowa State early in the season couldn't get anything going offensively. All of a sudden has turned it around, and they are just blasting people now. And this Iowa team could make a run. They're 4-1 in the Big Ten right now, and with their record. They have Oregon coming into Iowa here in 2 weeks on November 8th, and they go out to USC. And if they could win those 2 football games, and they got Nebraska at the end of the season, which I think they could beat, that this Iowa Hawkeye team at 10-2 could sneak into the college football playoffs, and they could hold a team potentially like Oregon out of the college football playoff, depending on how the Big 12 and the ACC shakes out and how many teams these conferences are going to get in. So at the end of the day, the Iowa Hawkeyes here could clearly make a run. I mean, Oregon did not look very good yesterday against Wisconsin. And yes, it was pouring down rain pretty much the whole game. And Dante Moore went out with what, I'm not sure exactly what the injury is, but he might have got a bloody nose and held him out the rest of the game. Maybe they thought that, hey, we're going to win this game against Wisconsin no matter what in this pouring down rain, so why put Dante in any kind of situation that could get him hurt? But the truth of the matter here is the Iowa Hawkeyes are really improved, and it wouldn't be a shocker here at the end of the season for this team to be sitting at potentially 10-2 with wins against Oregon and on the road at USC, and this could be quite the development here. So I know that it sounds bonkers, but the bottom line is we're in a bonkers season, and the Iowa Hawkeyes are bouncing back, and they're really starting to play great football, and that is just an unbelievable statement considering what we've all saw for the last, half a dozen years with the Iowa Hawkeye offense. But this team is really improving, and their defense is just really solid, and it's going to be a great matchup between Iowa and Oregon in a couple weeks, and we'll see who can come out on top of that game. I don't know. I haven't seen a spread for that game, but there's a possibility that Iowa might be favored in that game. We're going to find out. And Oregon's never been to Iowa. Tough place to play. And you got to bring your A game. And way Oregon looked yesterday, their A game is not where they're at right now. So we're going to find out if they can change that around here over the next 2 weeks as they get in preparation to go to Iowa. But bottom line here, folks, is Man, it would be something else if the Iowa Hawkeyes could work their way into a position to where they're in the college football playoff, and it would be, quite frankly, shocking, to say the least, after what we saw of them against Iowa State early in the season and that pathetic offense that they were running. But it's definitely improved. And, there's nothing to say other than it's definitely improved. So we're going to find out where they go from here. But the fact that we're even talking about Iowa going into November is, Kirk Ferentz is just, he just continues to get it done and win games. And in this year, he's got a little bit better offense and still a solid defense. So we're going to find out where it is. But the Iowa Hawkeyes could make a playoff run. And that right there in itself is shocking, to say the least. Thought 5 on Week 9 in college football. All right, folks. A lot of people weren't sure if the Texas A&M Aggies could go into Death Valley at night and beat LSU, even though LSU is in a reeling here this year, and they're just not a very good football team. Garrett Nussmeier is just, he's just quite frankly bad. We just leave it at that. He's just really not good. For a guy that came in with all the hype, this guy is, and talking about a first-round draft pick, I wouldn't even see him going to the 4th or 5th round at best this year with the way he's playing. At the end of the day, Marcel Reed and this Texas A&M defense just keep playing lights freaking out, and they go into LSU last night and throw up 49 points on an LSU team that, yes, granted, is not good. They're just not good offensively, and defensively they're falling apart. And Brian Kelly, quite frankly, LSU probably should just let him go now, because he is not going to survive the rest of the season, and maybe they could get something together in the next 2 weeks and go on the road to Alabama. But Texas A&M continues just to be, quite frankly, the most balanced team in the SEC right now. Look, Alabama has their strengths, but they also have their weaknesses, and they showed it yesterday. I think it's time that we can say that Ty Simpson's not by far the best quarterback in the country. It's no question about that. He's not. He's a very good quarterback, but by far not where we were at 2 weeks ago. Well, this kid's the best quarterback in the country, according to ESPN, but he's just not. He's just not there. He's a very, very good quarterback. Don't get me wrong. But to say that he's anywhere near, maybe he's a top 5 quarterback in the country, but he's not by far the most dominant quarterback in the country, which I heard a lot of people saying. They should have probably lost that game to South Carolina yesterday. But enough about Alabama. We're still talking about Texas A&M. And Texas A&M continues to get it done. They had more return yards on special teams than LSU had offense. This is how dominating this team is right now. And they have a pretty average schedule to finish out the year. Their toughest real game here is going to be on the road at Texas at the end of the year. Now, who knows what Texas is? They're week to week, day to day on how good they're going to be and how bad they could play. And they looked terrible yesterday up until the end, and then all of a sudden they looked great. They came back from 17 down, which has only been done in the last 227 times twice that's ever happened in college football. So, in their last 225 games or something like that, some stat like 2 and 225 when you're down by 17 points in the fourth quarter, and Texas is the 2 that came back and did it. So the bottom line here is that Texas A&M continues to win, continues to get it done. Now, they always have challenges in November, but their schedule is really lined up for them to make a real solid run here and get to that Texas game undefeated, and we'll see if they can win that game in Austin. But the bottom line here is that Texas A&M is still, in my opinion, the most balanced team in the SEC, and Alabama and Georgia are still teams that have things to work out, and they will get them worked out. I think Georgia's defense after the bye week will become better. Now, can they play better and better? We'll see. They got Florida coming up next week, and Florida is nothing great, but Florida's also got a new sheriff in town, at least an interim. So we'll see if they can rally around and play that, and if DJ Lagway could play better. If we all remember, if DJ Lagway didn't go out against Georgia last year, a lot of people that watched that game thought Georgia would have lost that game to Florida. So we're going to find out. But the bottom line, again, is that Texas A&M is definitely the most balanced team in the SEC, and they have a real shot at getting to that SEC championship game and taking on either Alabama or Georgia. In my opinion, one of those two teams is going to make it, and seeing if they can beat one of those teams and getting a top 4 seed in the college football playoff. And there's a real good possibility of that. So congratulations, Texas A&M. You really went in and played absolutely lights out yesterday and just dominated that LSU team in every facet of the game. And it's quite impressive to watch. And Marcel Reed, like I've told you before, if you're not watching this kid, he's just absolutely dynamite in all facets of the football game. So there we go. That's the thought on Texas A&M. I still don't think they have the number 1 strength of record in the country that ESPN's trying to give us. And remember, ESPN makes that poll or that stat line. So that's not some kind of stat line that's looked upon by all of college football and say this is what it is. No, ESPN creates that garbage. But the truth of the matter is Texas A&M is still a very solid football team, and we'll see if they can get over their November blues that they normally have and win this year. And if they can, they're going to be very dangerous because any defense is going to have a real challenging time preparing for Marcel Reed. So there we are. Texas A&M blasts LSU 49-25 yesterday in Death Valley. Extra. Well, folks, for you that may not know, I have a son who plays at Wilmington College, Division III college football, and Wilmington College has not been a very good football team over the course of his 4 seasons there, but we did something yesterday that has not been done in quite a few years in program history, and that's right, they won back-to-back games for the first time at least since 2000, and they've won 2 games, and they've got themselves to 3-4 going into the final 3 games. Can they get 2 of those wins and get to 5-5 after going 1-9 last season? I think it's a real possibility, and we'll see if they can get there. But it's really impressive that we got to see back-to-back wins for the first time in his career there at Wilmington College. They get themselves to 3-4. They're playing Marietta next week, which is generally a decent football team. I think they're having a little bit of a down year this year. Not super down, but not as good as they were last year. So we'll see if they can win that game next week and see where they go. But Wilmington College gets back-to-back wins for the first time in a handful of years, at least 6 years, since they've been able to do this. So congratulations to the Quakers. It was a real struggle with the not great football team. They turned the ball over 6 times, but they still ended up pulling out a game 34-24 against Anderson University. Quick hitters. Speaking of something that doesn't happen very often, yesterday we had the Kent State Golden Flashes and the Akron Zips both win on the exact same day. This is absolutely unheard of, folks. This has not been done in quite a few years, but we have Bowling Green rolls into Kent State and somehow manages to lose to Kent State. And Eddie George's Bowling Green team was on a little bit of a roll, but they couldn't stop the Golden Flashes late in the game. And the Golden Flashes ended up pulling out a victory over Bowling Green. And then we had Akron beat Buffalo. This is truly a disappointing season for Buffalo. I thought Buffalo and Toledo were going to be 2 teams that were on a collision course to play in the MAC championship at the beginning of the season. And Buffalo just is falling apart at 4-4. And somehow they let really a depleted Akron Zips team here. I mean, this was not a good football team coming into the season. They had a lot of kids leave the program. They have all kinds of issues with academics and eligibility. And somehow the Akron Zips are 3-4 this football season, or 3-5. They've got 3 wins, and a team that had no business winning at all, and they beat Buffalo. And then you got Kent State beating Bowling Green. So Northeast Ohio has got 2 winners yesterday. That's right. And Kent State and their arch rival Akron, they're building up for that Rubber Bowl game, that shootout that we get close to the end of the season between the 2 of those teams. So, man, great job for the Flashes. Great job for the Zips. But it's just going to be an absolutely bonkers game later in this season. The fact that these two teams have more than one win combined. So great job, you two. And I'm sure Northeast Ohio doesn't even know about it, but I do. So great work. Man, we had the Washington Huskies, hosting Illinois yesterday, and Washington just throttles Illinois yesterday at home. I mean, it is very, very challenging to go up to Huskyville and play in that stadium, and Illinois found out for sure. But Washington continues to improve. Yes, they've got losses to Ohio State and to Michigan, but this team is getting better and better, and that was quite the win yesterday for the Washington Huskies in the way that they really dominated Illinois, which a lot of us thought Illinois was going to be a surprise team in the Big Ten, and we all are surprised that they're just not that good right now, considering the talent they had coming back. So congratulations to Washington and throttling Illinois yesterday in a game that, quite frankly, I thought was going to be a little closer than it was, and I was completely wrong on that. So the Huskies, just keep chucking along, and they're going to make some noise here in the Big Ten. Oh, God, Washington still has to play Oregon. They still got to play USC. And, they could be a giant killer here. They could beat an Oregon team, or if they could beat USC. Not that USC is a giant, but still, it's still a very quality win here. And they could work themselves up. I don't think they could get to a playoff spot in this situation just because of what's ahead of them in the Big Ten. But clearly an improving team, and I wouldn't be surprised if Jed Fish is one of the big name names looking at a program with an opening coming up, and maybe even like a Penn State, or I don't think it'll be Florida, but maybe he could take over an Ole Miss team after Lane Kiffin leaves there. So we'll see what happens. But Washington played a tremendously good football team in taking down Illinois yesterday. Like I told you earlier, man, Alabama just looked absolutely pedestrian yesterday against South Carolina. South Carolina is not a good football team. Lenore Sellers is he's just an average quarterback. People that thought this kid was going to be a top couple pick in the draft, they're just out of their mind. But Alabama had to come back and win this football game and score, 15 points late in the game to 8 points to tie it up, a touchdown and a 2-point conversion to make it 22. And then not exactly sure what South Carolina was thinking at the end of this game. They had 37 seconds left in this game. I know they let Alabama score, but with no timeouts and 37 seconds, it's just going to be challenging to go down and score, 80 or 75 yards in that situation. And Lenore Sellers hasn't shown us anything that he can do that. So bottom line here is Alabama looked pedestrian yesterday, but that's what happens in college football. And we'll see if Alabama can turn it around here. They got to play LSU in 2 weeks. So we'll see how they look in 2 weeks. I got a feeling they're going to just blast LSU here as we go into that. All right, let's give some props to Kennesaw State, man. Yeah, last year this was a team that jumped up from FCS to FBS, and they had a really tough year last year. I think they went 1-11. But this year, this football team is really, really playing well. If you haven't watched them on a Tuesday or Wednesday night in the last couple of weeks, this team is really starting to improve and starting to make a name for themselves. So let's give it up to Kennesaw State. Speaking of a turnaround, man, Kirk Cinetti is just I don't even have words for what he's doing at Indiana here. They just go in yesterday and just blast UCLA. And no, UCLA is not a great football team, but they had been in the last 3 weeks a much improved football team after they changed the coach and got rid of Deshaun Foster. But Indiana, this is the second time against Big Ten teams that Indiana was able to sit down their quarterback and Fernando Mendoza at the start of the fourth quarter because they've been dominating so much. And they go in and they just blast UCLA by 50 points. And you just got to give it up. I mean, this is definitely one of the top two teams in the country right now, and there's no question about it. I think they would dominate 75% of the SEC, and it wouldn't even be a close game, honestly. And we'll see where they are against the top 3 or 4 teams in the SEC, and hopefully they get to play one of them here in the playoffs. But this team is just absolutely a juggernaut right now, and great job for the Indiana Hoosiers and that giant, massive blowout they had yesterday against UCLA. Speaking of a team that's not dominating in a fashion that we thought maybe they could during this coming into the season, that is SMU, man. Coming off that playoff appearance last year and you know that pretty good showing there in the ACC last year and runner-up in the ACC championship game last year. This team is just falling apart, and yesterday I thought that they would go in and just dominate Wake Forest, and they end up losing 13-12 against an okay Wake Forest team, but by far a team that they should have beat. And SMU just blew their chances, any chances they had left of trying to make an ACC run, much less a college football playoff run. So SMU is a dog of the week, man. They just couldn't get it done yesterday at Wake Forest and could only score 12 points with that supposedly high potent offense. So there you go. SMU just stumbles out and loses to Wake Forest 13-12. And the last thought is this. Ole Miss is making it to the college football playoffs. You've seen their schedule. It's not hard here as their remaining 4 football games. They probably won't make it to the SEC championship game, which is an absolute blessing in disguise for Ole Miss. They don't want to have to play in that SEC championship game. They can end up here at 11-1 and go on and get, maybe the 5th, 6th, or 7th seed and definitely a home game in the college football playoff and make it real challenging. Forever has to go down and play them. But Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin. Now the question is going to be I think Lane Kiffin's leaving Ole Miss to go to Florida. That's my personal opinion. I think he has more ability to win the national championship, but what if he makes a deep run in the college football playoff with Ole Miss? What happens then? So that's going to be real interesting. But Ole Miss goes into Oklahoma and comes back against a solid defense in Oklahoma and throws up a bunch of points, 30-some points, 34 points I think it was, and they got themselves in the position. That was the game they had to win to get their position, and they're going to be definitely a top 8 team in the college football playoff, and it's going to be real interesting to see where they go. And Trinidad Chambliss just continues to play better and better and better, and see how he does. I really think that if he had to do it over again against that Georgia team, they'd make some changes, and they could potentially beat Georgia. We'll see what happens. Maybe they'll play Georgia in the college football playoff. We'll find out, but that is a good, solid football team and getting better and better week by week, and Ole Miss has, quite frankly, not a very challenging schedule here, and it looks like they're going to go 11-1 to end the season and make the college football playoff. All right, folks, well, there's our show for week number 9 of this crazy college football season. We'll be back on Tuesday for the Baker's Dozen poll. That's right, the most accurate poll in college football, and we'll see where the shakeups are going to be, and there's definitely going to be some shakeups in there. And we'll see you on Thursday for the weekly predictor show. It's been a challenging season to predict anything, and it's just going to get crazier as we get into November, so we'll see if we can get it a little better week to week. But the bottom line is, this is one of the craziest football seasons, and I told you that was going to be the case here when we went into the season. It was going to be like 2007. It's even bonkers, more bonkers than it was in that season. And here we go. We're going to find out because November is where the real teams show up, and we'll see where we are. So remember, gather around in ALTT. We'll see you soon.